My name's Nick. I started Nick's Electronics Repair over a decade ago, and since then we've fixed over 25,000 devices. In today's video, we're going to be fixing an ECU for a Saab 9-3, and the customer that sent it in was experiencing the misfire codes. The ones they were experiencing were the P0201, P0202, P0203, P0204, and P0245. I already have their ECU plugged into our vehicle, so let's run it and see what we get. We're going to use OBD Wiz and connect to the vehicle, and let's run a diagnostic, and it looks like it's already detecting a fault. Let's just clear the codes, make sure it's not remnants of another ECU we were testing earlier. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the vehicle on. I'm going to rev the engine a little bit. Let's refresh the codes. All right, so the codes are not being triggered. We're going to go take this car for a spin, and should get the codes to trigger pretty soon. All right, and it sounds like we just got our codes to trigger, and that was barely a quarter mile we drove. So far the throttle seems very responsive. I do not have a check engine light triggered on the dash. And once we park, we're gonna do a quick check on the exhaust, see if we get any white smoke. And it looks like the exhaust is pretty clear, so we're not experiencing the white smoke at this time. Yeah, I'm gonna rev it. That's 3,500 RPMs. Everything looks clear. All right. To get started with the repair of the ECU, we first need to open it. So we're going to remove the 3 screws on the top. We're going to be using a T15 tip. The actual opening process for the Saab ECU is quite lengthy, so we're going to do this off screen. If you're interested in finding out exactly how we do open these, we have another video that'll be linked in the description down below, as well as at the end of this video where we do show you how we open these up. But for now, we're going to do this off screen, and then we'll reconvene once it's opened up. I've just opened up the ECU, and we've exposed 2 IC chips right over here. These are the ones that most commonly have issues. Now the chips themselves are actually in good condition. What has issues is the connections, the solder balls that are between the chips themselves and the film that they rest on. So what we're gonna have to do is reflow them to reconnect those bonds. So we're gonna use our rework machine for that, and I'll pass it over to my tech Juan. All right, Juan, I'm gonna need some help with some reflowing if you don't mind. It looks like the film the chip sits on unfortunately bubbled, which caused one of the solder balls to explode and pop out from below the processor chip. What this means is that we are going to have to remove the chip entirely and perform a reball repair. We're just prodding the chip to ensure the solder is flowing properly before we go ahead and remove the chip from the PCB. In order to keep the video within a reasonable amount of time, we did perform the reball off screen, so our chip has already been reballed and ready for installation. Now that we've reattached the processor chip onto the ECU, we're going to do a couple checks to make sure that the solder balls are not shorting to one another below the chip. So the way we do that is we're going to do some short checks on the capacitors that are around the chip to make sure that obviously there are no shorts. So we're getting 265 ohms, and we're going to do just a couple random spot checks here. 270 kilo ohms, 14 kilo ohms. Check this one over here. 0.759 kilo ohms, so that's 700 ohms, kilo ohms. We'll just check one or two more here, and 286. Okay, next we're going to do a visual inspection on the processor. So we want to make sure that the processor is flush to the board. We want to make sure we don't see any bridging from the solder balls. And so the shape of these solder balls looks pretty good to me. I don't see any bridging. And this is our last side to check. And again, everything looks pretty good here. All right, it looks like the chip is installed properly. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the reflow of our second chip now. All right, so we have reballed this processor, we have reflowed this one. We're gonna do some short checks now on the second one that we reflowed. So same thing, we're gonna do a couple random spot checks on some of the capacitors around the chip, make sure we don't have any shorts, and then we're gonna do a check with the microscope. So for this one, we do have a few capacitors in the way. We'll have to try and look through those, but our solder balls look pretty good here. I'm looking both at the shape of the solder balls, I'm looking to make sure that they're not bridged and making sure that the processor is nice and flush and flat, not tilted at an angle or anything like that. And we're looking pretty good on all three sides that I checked. Now that our reball and reflow are completed, we are going to do a bench test before we bring the ECU out to the vehicle. So what we're doing here is I actually have it connected to our external power supply, giving it 12 volts, and then it is also connected to our laptop. I'm gonna be bringing up the Trionic can flasher, and we're gonna go ahead and flash both the MCP and ECU. So we're starting with the MCP here. And the reason we're doing this, the flashing of the program, is to ensure that the data is able to program properly, because if it is, that means that our repairs were done successfully. And let's see, it is saying everything is identical. And connection terminated. Okay, that's good news. Let's go ahead and do the same thing again, but for the main ECU programming. Okay, again, comparing for selective erase. Okay, and it's saying selected 0 out of 9 of the partitions because everything is identical and everything's all set. Okay, that does tell me that our reball and reflow were successful, so now we can go ahead and test it in the vehicle. Before committing to fully closing the Saab ECU, we are going to hook it up halfway into the vehicle. So it is still open, but we are using these jumper cables just to make sure that it's properly grounded so that the vehicle can start. We're not gonna drive it around yet, but we're gonna make sure that all of the codes are now gone. So the vehicle is starting and we have no more errors. There are 0 codes being triggered at this time. Let's go ahead and check out the OBD Wiz. We're gonna go ahead and do the same thing, connect. All right, and there are no pending stored codes. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove the ECU out of the vehicle, and what we'll do next is close it up so that we can actually drive the vehicle around and do some long-term testing. Let's go ahead and do a refresh on the codes. Okay. So we only drove just 3 miles right now, so we're gonna do more extended testing. When we were first testing this ECU before repairs, it was only within a quarter mile that we got the codes to trigger. Right now we're at about 3 miles and the codes are not triggering. That's not typically enough. We are gonna drive it for at least another 25 to 30 miles before we call it good. But for the purposes of this video, we are gonna call it a successful repair at this point. If you're interested in sending your Saab ECU for us to fix, we will have links to our flat rate services. We always offer a 1-year warranty, and the links that will be in the video description down below. If you are interested in finding out more about our other repair videos, you can check them out over there. Otherwise, if you found the video helpful or useful, make sure to leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and thank you for watching.